This is a test demonstration of the Sfeomi, that's Sfeomi, swing gate system, which can be purchased on Amazon UK. The difficulty that I'm having with this system is an inability to include a forward and reverse function. So what I would like to do is connect a forward and reverse button, and ideally a stop button as well, where I can press forward and the actuator, the motor will turn to push the activator out. I'd like to be able to press stop and forward again, and so the actuator would move forward again and stop and so on. I would like to be able to select backwards as well as forwards, rather than relying on a loop system, which is what seems to work right now. So what happens is if I press the button on the remote fob, and only one of them works to connect to the control board here, it will work in a loop. So if I press it, it will move, let's say, forward. I'll have to press it to stop. If I press the button again, it will then reverse, and I press it again to stop, and only then if I press it, it will move forward again. So it works in a loop function. That's not ideal. Now there's no power supply going to the board at the moment. I just wanted to run you through what pins I'm working on here, so you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. So first of all, we have this third terminal here, third pin and fourth pin. This is for motor 1, and the 5th and 6th pins would be for motor 2. Now we're only using one motor here in this demonstration, which is going to be motor 1. There are only 2 wires. Now there's a number of small gauge cables here just to carry enough power, but there are only 2 wires on each of the motors. So the only way you can reverse polarity is some method through the board. A lot of these control arms or actuators will have 3, 4, and even 5 cores. So it's a lot easier to reverse the polarity through individual inputs on the board. So just to run you through the pins here, we have this first pin here. This is 24 volts DC. This is the power that I'm going to be drawing from. Then we have pin 2 is common, pin 3 is IR. Now the remote fob won't work properly, or it won't reverse the polarity unless COM and IR are connected. So I'll replace a block which bridges these 2 connections shortly. We then have the 4th and 5th pins are positive and negative test 24 volt DC supply. Moving on to the next block, which is, if we follow on through, we have pin 6, which is a directional control. So this one is just an arrow pointing to my right here. And the next pin here, pin 7, is an arrow pointing to the left. So that should be directional control. This 8 pin here, or let's say the third one in from the right hand side, this is the pin which works in very much the same way as the remote fob. It will work in a loop function. This second pin in from the right hand side is within the same block. It's also supposed to control, my understanding is, the loop function, or left or right, open, close. However, nothing seems to happen when I make a connection here. This final pin here, or the first one in from the right hand side, is apparently a 1 button control. Or a 1 motor control. It's 1/2. It hasn't been used. It doesn't do anything in my testing here, but that's what the pin says. So I'm just going to connect the block back in place here before I supply power to the board. Okay, so now the common and IR terminals are connected. They're bridged. And this is my own little cable here, so I can make connections to these outer pins. Now I'm just going to supply power to the board. And I will now demonstrate with the remote fob that everything is hooked up and working in a loop function. So when I press the button first, it's going to open or push the arm out. I'll press it again to stop. I'll press it again to reverse. So polarity is then reversed. Once it's stopped, polarity reverses. And then I can press it again to stop. So 1, and stop, and 3, and 4 to stop. Okay, right, so that's working there fine. Only the top button works. None of the other buttons make a connection to the board. 2 of these fobs come with this particular kit. Both of them work fine. Okay, so what I have here is a 24 volts DC. And when you test it, it's closer to 21 volts. But that's neither here nor there. It provides enough current to send a signal through the board and get things working. So what I have found is that using this 3rd pin in, if I make a connection and then break the connection, it will work in the very same way as the remote fob. So I'll just make that connection to demonstrate here. So it's now connected. And I'm going to break the connection and it'll activate just like the remote. There we go. And I can do the same thing here and break the connection and it'll stop it. And now if I do it again, it will reverse and it can be stopped with the fob if I want. So I could make that connection and stop it, or stop it with the fob. Okay. Now, I'm going to show these connections here. So these are the directional ones, the arrows pointing left and right. Make a connection here, nothing is happening. Make a connection here, and as you can see, not a desirable result. We haven't damaged anything. We're just getting some arcing. So just to display that it still functions as intended, there we go. It's opening and closing. I will also get a short circuit here if I touch this 2nd pin in from the right, which is supposed to be able to control the polarity or reverse the polarity in some way, where I should be able to control forward and reverse functions. But if I make this connection, it will just short out. Nothing happens with this pin here. And just for display purposes, this will probably blow the 10 amp 250 volt fuse, which I can replace, but just to show you, there we go. Nothing happening there other than some arcing. So we haven't blown anything, thankfully. And I'll just make that connection there on the 3rd pin, which is working fine as expected. Now, as well as getting the power from the 1st pin here and running it off the 3rd pin in here from the right, it also works when you use the 5th pin in from the right, or the 1st directional button. So the button pointing away from the board. So if I make a connection here and I make a connection with the 3rd pin, I'll just make a more solid connection here. So I'll connect that pin like so, and that will also work in the same way as the remote, so using the 3rd pin in, so the power can be taken from there. However, it doesn't work, well, at least it doesn't make a short when you connect from the other pin here, the other open close pin. It also doesn't make any difference when you're connecting any other pin other than the center pin here, or the 3rd one in from the right. Okay.